So we'll do a shorter video on sun salutations, some basics, and also some options and modifications. And sun salutations are a building block of a lot of flow and vinyasa type classes. And it's good to know some different ways of doing things because depending on the class that you're following, you might not get the options along the way, depending on which video you're using. So slow this down and break this down a bit and give you some different things you could do, different ways of doing things with a sun salutation. So now I'll go over there and that. So I've got some yoga blocks here, which I will include in some of the options and variations that we might do. So we start typically at the top end of a mat. Feel the grounding of your feet. Feet are about hip width apart under you. Inhale, reach your arms up overhead. Bring your palms together. Exhale, bring your hands to your heart. I'm going to go into the first one kind of by stages. That's the first couple of movements. Inhale, out and up. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, lift up halfway, back parallel to the ground, pushing against your legs. Feel the crown of your head. Reach forward away from your tailbone. Exhaling, relax down. Inhale, roll up to standing, hands overhead. Exhale, bring your hands to your heart. Now, before we move on to the rest of it, I want to emphasize use of the legs to spare the back. So you'll notice when I am going down here, and when I'm coming up here, or coming up to here, that I'm flexing my legs a lot. So for every degree of work that my legs are doing, that's less work here. And the legs are stronger than the back. So using the legs will spare the back, help keep your back feeling better. Inhale, out and up. Exhale, fold forward. Inhale, lift halfway. Exhale, fold forward. Now set the boxes aside for now and weave them in a little later. From here, we step back to plank. Now plank, just like the name implies, is a long, straight shape. So feel for your hips coming down in line with your shoulders and your knees. And one of the nice things about a video is I can look and see how I lined up there. It can take a while to feel when your hips are in line like that. Now, anytime you're doing plank, you can let your knees down to make a shorter plank, but see my hips are still in line with my shoulders and my knees. So we don't want to do this. Sometimes we let the knees down, and then that's not a plank. You know, let the hips come down here for more of a plank-like shape. Usually the first time we go through a sun salutation, we'll go slower and maybe do things by a lesser degree. And one way we do that is on the first one, we will come all the way down, keeping the elbows in close as you lower, down to the floor, let everything go, and untuck the toes even. Then pressing into your hands, you inhale and lift your head and chest. So we come to a heart opener. It might be a low cobra like this. You want to listen to your low back every time and see what feels like a good height. So cobra can be anywhere in here, from here through this range. So that's still cobra. It's a higher cobra, knees on the ground. When you're ready for it, if you're ready for it, lifting your knees up so you're on your hands and feet, then that's upward facing dog. And note the spine is a long continuous curve. I'm not scrunching my neck back like this or letting it hang down like that. The neck is the top of the spine. Now to go from here to downward facing dog on the first one, it's nice to kind of pass through table. Come up on the hands and knees, go by degrees. Curl your toes under, press into your feet to lift your knees, press into your hands and lift your tail. So downward facing dog is basically a big upside down V. And in the first one, it's helpful to pedal the feet up and down. Sometimes we call this walking your dog. Letting your heels get closer to the floor. Now, when I was new to practice, my heels didn't touch the floor. And if your heels don't touch the floor, it's okay. Aim them closer, but don't obsess about it. Certainly don't cause yourself pain to get your heels to the floor. Just aim towards the floor. Think direction, not destination. And after that movement, coming to some stillness, feeling the length all the way up the arms, shoulders, back, glutes, legs, everything in the back of the body lengthening in this posture. And with practice over time, this is actually a resting pose. When you're new, that sounds like madness. It doesn't feel restful when you're new at it, but over time, it's a nice restful stretch, elongating the entire back body. From here to transition to forward fold, inhale, bend the knees, look up towards the hands. Exhaling, step forward, take as many steps as you want. Small steps are generally better. Inhale to lift up halfway. Exhale, come down. Inhale all the way up. Exhale, bring your hands to your heart. So I'll go through that once more, and then we'll go through how blocks can help you do it. Inhale up. Exhale down. Inhale, come up halfway. Exhale down. Plant your hands and step back to your plank. Remember, you can always let your knees down and do a shorter plank. Now, once you're warmed up after the first one, maybe when you exhale and lower down, you come just halfway, elbows staying close. Inhale, bring your heart forward for your cobra or upward facing dog. Exhale, rock back and up to downward facing dog. Now I'm going to rewind from my down dog to my up dog to talk about what I just did with my feet. So I've learned over time to roll over my toes and go like this. That took a while to get there. So other ways you could do this, you could just flip one foot and then the other, and then go back up. Because the rolling over the foot thing, it just kind of evolved over time for me. Like getting the heels close to the floor, don't get hung up about it. There's nothing wrong with going from your heart opener here, engaging one leg, and then the other, and then going back and up is totally fine. Inhale, bend your knees, look forward. Exhale, step your feet forward. Inhale, come up halfway. Exhale, come down. Inhale all the way up. Exhale, hands to heart. Now to play with our blocks. How can blocks help me do this? Well, blocks bring the floor closer to your hands. And what that can do on some of these transitions is give you more room to move your legs, giving more room between your torso and the floor as you bring your legs forward. So the movements are the same. Inhale out and up. Exhale, fold down. Inhale, come up halfway. Exhale, fold. Plant your hands and step back to plank. Now you're in the same shape, the same position, but the plank will feel different because you're at a slightly different angle from the ground here. And you can do your heart opener the same way. Maybe your knees are down, maybe they're up. You can lower halfway or all the way. Inhale, come forward. Now, you might find that you can come to a higher heart opener with the blocks in play because your back may feel different. Exhale, rock back and up to downward facing dog. Now, the blocks may very well help your heels get closer to the floor. Maybe you feel more length in your back. Now, here's the key thing with the blocks. When you come forward from here, this is the transition most impacted by the use of the blocks. That is much more useful stepping forward with blocks under your hands. Inhale, come up halfway. Exhale, come down. Inhale all the way up. Exhale, bring your hands to your heart. So using blocks is not always a matter of, I need blocks here because I can't do this without the blocks. It can be just a matter of it feels better, it feels more easeful. So not a black or white thing. Sometimes it can even be a mood thing. Some days I just feel like using the blocks to do that. Prop use is skillful. Props are not a crutch. You're not handicapping yourself to use the props. When I was new, I'll confess, I was one of those, I don't need those blocks. And I wouldn't use the blocks, or I'd use them as little as possible. The more I practice, the more I have come to use blocks. Prop use is skillful. And I want to thank my colleague Liza Meyer in Boston because they reminded me of that recently in an Instagram post. I knew that, but I hadn't emphasized it in a while, you know. Now, Liza is a great one for modification. So speaking of modification, another way that sometimes modify practice has to do with this whole video dynamic, right? Of practicing online, practicing on screen. Depending on your space and how you've got things set up, sometimes it's not so great to be up the top of your mat. Maybe your hands go off screen, you'd rather have them on screen. So we can vary the sun salutation by changing a couple of the transitions. So it starts out the same way. I'm at the back end of the mat instead of the front. So then, instead of stepping my feet back to go to a plank, I walk my hands forward. So this is just an option we can use to make things a little more video friendly if you're sharing practice online. So my plank is the same. Everything goes through the same, and then the other transition also involves forward fold. So I used a different transition to go from forward fold, so plank. I use a different transition to go from downward dog back to forward fold. Literally back, because now instead of stepping my feet to meet my hands, I can step my hands to meet my feet. So I still have gone from a downward dog to a forward fold. And then this is all the same. And sun salutation can look like that. Now, back to a bit about the blocks, because one thing that affects how these transitions go, there are many factors, how long you've been practicing, how limber you feel, what kind of strength and flexibility you've got going on, but also sometimes just mechanics. How long are your arms? How long are your legs? How much do you have here or here? So just the shape of your torso, when you come forward, when you're bringing your legs forward, different size people will have different experiences of this transition, with or without blocks. So I used to be heavier than this, and so there was some more weight here. Depending on the size and shape of your torso, the transitions feel different, and you can do different things with your blocks as you come forward. So I'll just jump to a down dog to show. Sometimes you start to come forward from your downward facing dog, and you get to this point and it feels like you can't walk your feet forward. So that may be because your belly is hitting your thighs, or maybe something going on in your back, in your arms. So other things you could do here, you could change the height of your blocks, and then you get a little further. You might even come up like this. And maybe that's not even enough. And then you can, at any height, you could walk your hands back to your feet to complete the transition. And it's not any big deal from there. You're still in a forward fold. And you may, before you start the next one, find that you have to just take a step forward. No big deal. Now, some other things you might do. Sometimes we modify things to make them more accessible and more useful. Sometimes we'll modify things to make them more challenging, depending on where we're at that day, where we're at in our practice, in our journey with this. So, show some other things we might do here. Because sometimes it's nice to change a transition to make it less work, but sometimes we enjoy doing things that really require more effort, more challenge. So sometimes, and again, this is one of those things that came over time, like getting my heels to the ground or rolling over my toes. Sometimes instead of stepping forward from downward facing dog, we hop forward like this. And you want to float and you want to have a soft landing. Now, having a soft landing is not just about making it pretty, it's about sparing your back a jarring landing. So, landing hard is going to register in your lower back and perhaps be painful. So if you try this hopping forward and you find that you're having a hard landing and you're feeling a jolt in your lower back, don't do the leap. Don't do the hopping forward. Go back to the stepping forward. And over time, as your practice grows, as you become more flexible and your arms and your legs get stronger, you'll be better able to do the hopping. So one thing is to feel your low back. The other thing really is listening. If it's a hard landing, it's likely going to hurt. You're probably not going to get the hard landing, the loud landing without that little jarring feeling in the back. Now, sometimes downward facing dog is simply too much. Other things we can do in a sun salutation, if you're having one of those days, if down dog is not your friend, instead of going to downward facing dog, you could just come to child's pose and do that. Another thing we might do, sometimes downward facing dog, we have trouble in the wrists. So you can do your downward facing dog on your forearms instead. Now, you can't really step your feet up to meet your hands from here. There's not room to do that. So you might just come down onto your hands and knees and find your way to forward fold in some other manner. So these are some options for different ways to transition, different ways to explore a sun salutation, but you ought to feel free to find your own ways as well. Find your own modifications. You can change your practice. So it's great to have examples of others to follow, but know that each of us finds a practice that's best for ourselves. So let yourself have the freedom to experiment, to try different things. I offer options. Any teacher can offer you options. No teacher can feel what's going on in your body. So it's great to have someone showing you what to do. It's great to have someone telling you what to do. Your own body is very wise. Listen to your body. See what feels right for you. And feel free to go off script, to play around. Sometimes we say working on this or working on that. I really like to think of playing. Play with your downward dog, play with your transitions, play with your plank, play with the blocks, and find what works best for you. And when you're in a class, when you have a live instructor with you on Zoom or in person, however you're practicing, ask questions. Questions are great teachers. There seems to be an unwritten rule in yoga classes that the teacher talks and no one else does, because that's generally how it is. So people presume that's how it is. I know for me, I love to get questions. I don't get bothered by it. I don't consider it a problem. I don't even consider it an interruption. A question is a contribution to the class. And there might be someone else in that class who wondered the same thing or didn't wonder the same thing, but benefits from the question and from the answers. Questions are often more important than the answers. Again, this is Leo Bray on behalf of Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center. Thanks for joining me today to explore for a little bit sun salutation options and variations. Visit us online at urbanyoga.org or Kristen Olson's Urban Yoga Center on Facebook. Stop by the tip jar as you're able to and check out our schedule of classes. We're here every day. We're somewhere every day. Sometimes I'm in my studio, sometimes at the Urban Yoga Center studio, and we have outdoor classes. Speaking of which, our outdoor classes this week will be back at Ruth Hardy Park, where our outdoor classes began in the spring. For a while, we've been at the Palm Springs Convention Center on Jackie Lee Houston Plaza, and that's because of grass maintenance that was going on at Ruth Hardy Park. So to join us outdoors, Thursday, Friday, Saturday at 8:15 a.m. or Sunday at 9:45 a.m., please come to the northeast corner of Ruth Hardy Park by the school. And to help you find it, there are big sandwich board signs out on the sidewalk that say Urban Yoga. So look for the sign on the sidewalk, and then you can see us not far from the sign. Bring water, bring your mask, and bring a mat if you got one. If you don't have a mat, Kristen has props for sale. So in the Sunday class, you could show up and buy some props, not just mats. She's got other props as well. Questions and feedback are always welcome, whether they're on Zoom, whether they're in person, or online. So feel free to leave comments, questions on YouTube. Have a wonderful day.